Welcome to the Dealmaker Uncut podcast, where we speak to some of the UK's most exciting entrepreneurs and hear their investment journeys. We'll discuss the challenges, successes and lessons they've learned along the way, with expert deals commentary from Jonathan Boyers, Head of Alvarez Marsal Corporate Finance, and me, Chris Maguire, Executive Editor at BusinessCloud. Welcome everyone to the latest episode of the Dealmaker Uncut podcast, powered by Alvarez Marsal. My name is Chris Maguire and I'm the Executive Editor of BusinessCloud. As always, I'm joined by the multiple award-winning dealmaker himself, Jonathan Boyers. Jonathan's been involved in deals totaling billions of pounds during his long and illustrious career, and he's a Managing Director and the Head of Alvarez Marsal's Corporate Finance practice in the UK. Welcome, Jonathan.
Thanks, Chris. Great to be here.
Now, this podcast gets you inside the deal. In the first part of the show, we're going to be interviewing our special guest. After that, we'll then have a short break. And in part two, Jonathan will be leaning on his 35 plus years of working in corporate finance to answer listener questions. So, Jonathan, who are we speaking to today?
Thanks, Chris. Well, today we're talking to somebody who's been a friend of mine for many years, John Hughes. Like me, John spent most of his career working at KPMG before leaving in 2016 after 29 years. Now, since then, he's gone from strength to strength. He's worked as chairman, non-exec director, advisor, interim CEO, and probably a number of other roles as well. One of the companies he's been involved in, Modern Milkman, recently announced a £10 million fundraise. John's currently the chairman of Cortus Advisory Group, which is another business that's doing really well. And we'll find out more about what John's been up to. So, hi, John. Great to have you.
Well, thank you both. It's great to be here. A little bit nervous, but it's great.
So it sounds a bit like This Is Your Life, doesn't it, John? And actually, since we wrote the script and we spoke, you've joined Sowena, which is a recruitment platform as well. So you really are a busy bee. John, during your 29 years at KPMG, you were head of private equity and spent 25 years in M&A advising as well. Just give our listeners and our viewers a brief summary of your KPMG career.
Wow. How long have you got? Traditional path, going from audits. In those days, they sent us around different places, including tax and pensions, believe it or not. And then I landed into, did some what they call transformational consulting today. And then I did various things, which I'm very proud of and humbled. I was a cornerstone of setting up what is today's KPMG Global Transaction Services, which was really good. That took me around the world. It enabled me to join the global board for learning and development, and they threw in a couple of secondments, one in Australia, which was fantastic.
You were one of the first full-time due diligence partners, due diligence people there.
Absolutely, I was. When I first started, I actually worked and reported into a corporate finance partner, was myself and me, and that was it. And started writing engagement letters from scratch, and then became the first partner.
So at KPMG, your clients included the likes of Shop Direct, Findle and Eddie Stobart. When you left in 2016, you were the obvious choice to become group chairman of the loss-making delivery giant Yodel. So what was the situation that you found yourself in at Yodel, and what was the brief? Because it was in a sticky situation, wasn't it?
Yeah, I got, without wishing to name drop, I got a call from Aidan Barclay asking me to come in and be his chairman and to mentor the CEO. Which was fantastic in that respect. What I found was horrendous. It was almost nothing worked, and probably anyone listening in on this podcast have probably upset most of them in terms of a failed delivery. But it needed a full transformation. It needed a brand resetting. It needed new people bought in. But fundamentally, it needed the integrity to be brought back into it.
And you were the chairman, but I mean, some people see that as a bit of a ceremonial role, but you actually decamped yourself down to Hatfield in Hertfordshire.
I worked Monday to Friday in Hatfield in various hotels with the support and blessing of my partner, Louise. And you get through it, but it was an executive chairman, and for a period, I can't remember what it was, about 6 months, I was actually CEO as well.
Must have been quite a change from being an advisor.
It was, Jonathan. We go through these you hear these cliches now and again, it's lonely. Well, it was scary, by yourself, who to trust, who not to trust.
Okay, and so once I'm not sure if you'd finished at Yodel. You became a non-exec director and the interim finance director at Revive Global. Do you want to talk about that for a little while?
Yeah, that was an interesting one. Again, another purposeful business run by an incredibly charismatic powerhouse, Sarah Lomas, with a personal desire to bring preventative, personalised health to a lot more people, which was fantastic. That was involved in sitting on the board, helping raise finance, bringing new people on. It was interesting. Left a few years ago now, but yeah.
Okay, and so you've been involved with a couple of several businesses actually that have been all involved in sort of early stage fundraising. You're currently the acting CEO of a company called Steamaco. But you were also the chairman of Qualtex, which I think was Qualtex Global, where you were involved in a fundraise there. And so I think it would be useful if you could just talk a little bit about the fundraising environment for these types of businesses.
I think if I start with the end in mind, then I think what I've learned, and I've had to learn a lot, is make sure you go with funders you can trust and who are supportive. So at Steamaco, we have Dave Foreman, who's of Bridgewater, who's gone through the recently hugely successful merger. So having someone like Dave supporting you is fantastic, or even people like Mercia, Stephen at Mercia. It's sort of, because when the chips are down, you need those type of investors behind you. And I think the other thing is to take the journey on you. Make sure you've got the support at home, the support in the office, because it's hideous, it's difficult, you've got lots of responsibility, you've got lots of jobs to look after, and it's emotionally straining. It's very difficult.
When companies go belly up and they run into trouble over investment, is it because they chose the wrong investor at the beginning? And when you go into a business, and no disrespect, but you've got a few grey hairs, you've been there, you've got the CV, and you're advising them, and they get offers from different investors, do you have to sometimes say to the founder, that's the wrong person for us, because if it goes wrong, we're going to run into a problem in 2-3 years' time? Is that sort of what your role is as well?
Yeah, a lot of my roles, certainly in the let's call it the technology space, in the early stage stuff, has been making sure the right team and founders work together. And if you've got founders that don't get on, for example, disagreement, that becomes hard yards, but you have to make some very difficult decisions.
I was going to ask you to describe what you thought the most important characteristics were for a sort of chairman, non-exec, for businesses like this. What do you think are the most important things to bring to those?
I think the most important thing, and I say when I I'm talking, just recently joined Sowena and going through what does that really mean, and what's the red lines. As a chairman, you are there for the responsibility for the company. So beyond the investors, beyond the people, it is that company. Those are the lines you can't cross. And a lot of people just forget it.
Yeah, because often if there's a PE house appoints a chairman, people perceive that they might be on the PE house's side, or sometimes management want them to be on their side.
Yeah. And it's not about size, it's absolutely the company, full stop.
Just explain the way that process works. So, in football transfer window, you have agents, okay, and they act on behalf of players, and they try and negotiate deals for their players, okay. So when you've got an impressive portfolio, and you've got different non-exec directors and chairmanships, etc., how does that process work? How would you be appointed a chairman of a company? Would it be is it like a nod, wink, wink, or do you go through a process? Is it advertised? 'Cause I think a lot of our listeners, a lot of our viewers, this will be completely new to them, John.
Well, for some strange reason, I've never really had to apply for anything as such. I've just been recommended, which is fantastic to the people who have given me that chance. But you do go through a proper process. You meet people. Invariably, I will want to meet all the other board members. I will speak to the investors. They'll do their diligence on me, and I'll go through a rigorous process. And if that doesn't happen, it would worry me because I want to be the right person for the job and I want someone else to assess that position as well.
Would you turn down?
Yeah, I'm going to ask about Modern Milkman.
I do
now.
turn down roles, yes.
So should we talk about Modern Milkman? Because that is a really interesting company. It's just secured a £10 million investment from Salica Investments, which means I think it's raised in total about 60 million. It's got quite a diverse shareholder base. And it's growing from its roots in basically delivering milk to becoming a sort of grocery, a wider international grocery delivery business, isn't it? Would you talk about that business for a little while?
Yeah, there's what would it call it? There's real irony here. So just go back to KPMG for a moment. One of my big transformation consulting projects was working on the demise of the doorstep delivery and working with the Milk Marketing Board and all those good things. And here I am today, supporting Simon Mellin, whose father was a milkman, and it's going back to sustainable milk deliveries, but trying to do it with technology, trying to do it in a sustainable way, and fundamentally trying to reorganise a doorstep. Now, let me just dwell on this. What does that really mean? And own the doorstep. Most courier businesses, which I've worked in and which you'll see around today, the person dropping the parcel off or whatever has one aim in life, and that's to get out of there as soon as possible within 2 minutes. And no one's really taken time to look at what else could be done at the doorstep. Speak to people, build relationships. Modern Milkman now is recycling. We're taking stuff back when we go and do the pickup. So it's a really exciting business led by an incredibly entrepreneurial chap.
It's a great business.
One of the interesting things about Simon Mellon, he just mentioned, of course, is that, have you ever interviewed Simon?
I've not interviewed him. I know him.
Okay, because, he is not your typical, he doesn't sound like your typical entrepreneur, does he? He's got a broad East Lancashire accent. He's gone out to the US, he's been out there with his family for about 18 months. He posts pictures on Instagram under about 50 foot of snow. He's got a cauliflower ear because he likes martial arts. He's got tattoos down his arms. But what he is he's just a really passionate, purpose-driven entrepreneur who's got a real idea how he wants to change the world. And that's so refreshing, isn't it?
And he's a nice guy.
Yeah.
And he's honest, he's got integrity, he's humble, he's got all those qualities, and he's fun as well,
Definitely fun, yeah.
Not everything you touch turns to gold. Can we talk for a minute about your role as chairman of Zedify, which was it was one of the UK's largest electric freight bike delivery networks, and I think that went into administration. If you're dealing with early stage businesses, this happens now and again, but what went wrong?
Yeah, that was heartbreaking. If you ever have a company that doesn't work and you have to let people go, and the impact on livelihoods, families, their jobs, how they feel is just a hideous. Why did it go wrong? Ultimately, financial institutions strategically have a look at where they're going themselves. And certainly for one of the financial institutions at the time, they decided that sustainable deliveries wasn't for them anymore. And and I probably jinxed it as well, because I can remember going home to my wife mid-November 2024 and said, that's it, we're done now. I've signed 2 contracts with GXO and I've had a blessing from GXO board. That's it, it's sorted. We're there. All we need now is to deliver on our promises. And 2 weeks later, I got told that the second round of funding wasn't going to happen.
From a personal point of view, John, as somebody who's had a lot of success in your life, and I'd like Jonathan's take on this as well, is that you talked about sometimes it can be a really lonely place. People look to you for answers, and you can see the walls closing in on you. As somebody who's had success in your life, do you struggle to sleep? Do you have to be somebody who rises above that and show direction to the board? What's that process like for you? What's the experience like? And I'll ask Jonathan's take on it as well, is that they just didn't get the funding they needed, and without the funding they couldn't survive. Is that something you see a lot? But what would your answer be first, John?
Well, to that sort of question really was, emotionally, yeah, it really hurts, but you try and guard those emotions, and, you try and maybe, sometimes I don't sleep, because I take it very personally. My wife would say I take it too personally, but it is important, and there is that emotional side of it. But you have to leave the emotional side when you get back in the saddle the next morning and try and encourage people and motivate them to, you go right to the end, you push yourselves right to the end. But there's a key theme here. I'm lucky enough, I've worked with some really, really good people to help you through it, to help you through your legal duties. And I was thinking, what really makes one of those people like, I don't know, Will Jones at Hill Dix or whatever locally, or John Noon even at Alvarez Marsal, they don't just give you the content advice, they help you on the emotional journey when you're having to deal with very, very complex personal things as well. It's that the advice from them is incredible.
Jonathan, the media often reports on the good stuff, doesn't it? But not everything works.
One of the most important ingredients for somebody, certainly in professional services and probably in wider business, is resilience as a characteristic. Things don't always go well. Occasionally, we all get told we're not wanted to continue in our role, or it's time to do something that you didn't necessarily want to. Maybe it's time to retire when you weren't ready, or and you need to pick yourself up and refocus and dust yourself down and start again. But from major things that happen to you, sometimes family matters. Some relationships might fall away, people might pass away. There's all sorts of things can happen. Really important to have resilience. Every time something bad happens, or you're never really sure whether it was completely bad. Sometimes there's positive consequences arise from things that seem to be bad. If you think that if you lose your job, that can be a catalyst for setting up a new business or doing something that you wouldn't have done if that hadn't happened. And the opportunities to learn from difficult things that happen provide a new string to your bow, and ability to counsel people or learn for next time. So actually, you've got to sort of resilience, but embrace some of these things and learn from them and make the most of them.
It's the key word for me: resilience, persistence, consistency. The three words, but certainly resilience would be the first one. I know I'm very mindful. We've got a Jonathan and a John on the call. So, John, I want to talk a little bit about your life, actually, because when you left KPMG, I would imagine your life was sort of, you had an idea of what it was going to look like, and then you got married again, and you became a dad again. You've got two grown-up daughters who you idolise, and then you've now got a third daughter, Harriet, who's 8 years of age. Every time I look at a news website, you've taken on a new advisory role as well. You seem to have got a completely new lease of life. Can I just say, for the benefit of our listeners, John looks about 42.
That's very kind.
So I put my glasses back on now, John.
He doesn't.
Yeah, but that new lease of life as well. You seem to have, and actually, there's a sort of synergy in a sense with, Jonathan to my left. Not because he's had a child, relatively late in life, but just in the sense that he's got a new lease of life. His child is, Alvarez and Marsal. But just from your perspective, you seem to be busier and happier than ever.
Yeah, I think when I left, let's call it my first chapter, my first career. I think I had visions of going fishing or playing golf and doing something slightly different, really. Anyway, but that didn't happen. But it's coming back to what Jonathan said before, really. How that change or a catalyst propels you in a different way. So I met my new wife, Louise, who's like a bedrock, and there's been. That's the resilience. That's the bit that gets me through. And like you said, I'm blessed. I'm blessed with 3 wonderful daughters. I've got 2 older ones, Becky and Hannah, that absolutely tell me what life is like, and what you should say and what you don't say these days, and everything else like that. And then I've got a little daughter called Harriet, who's 8 years old, and she brings the curiosity and everything else you'd expect of a young child.
I can actually, I'm looking at my phone now, because I can actually reveal, for the benefit of our growing audience, that John's just mentioned about what to say and what not to say, and he gets advice from his Gen Z children. So I said to John, looking forward to seeing you tomorrow. I'm probably going to ask a few questions about this, that, and the other. He sends it back, all sweet. Is that what the kids say
Yeah,
these days?
that's what they say. I thought that one would make you smile.
We've got one more business to talk about before we finish. You're the chairman of Cortus Advisory Group as well, where you've been reunited with the CEO there, Nicola Merritt, who we both know well as well. Cortus is doing well as well. Do you want to talk about your role there?
Yeah, Cortus. Again, you feel blessed, don't you? Well, I certainly feel blessed that I've got an opportunity to work with Nikki again. How we developed it when, we're going for over 63 people now, so we've got about 6 offices, 5 different disciplines, and international alliances starting. Not the size of Alvarez and Marsal, but, we're taking baby steps. And, working with Nikki, who's tremendous. She holds up that sort of thing to me, which is it's in her integrity. She's not a highly entrepreneur, an incredible CEO now. It's just wonderful.
No, I'm sure you're having lots of fun. So we worked together for quite a long time over the years, didn't we? Who'd have thought when we were in our late 20s that we'd have been having a podcast sharing our experience all these years later. What do you think's changed over that time, and what do you think stayed the same in the deal-making world?
I think, let's make it a positive statement. I think what I certainly see is there's so many good advisors out there, and not beyond their content and the advice they give, but how they give it, the integrity. I think those standards for me are certainly the people I work with, like yourselves indeed. That's still there, and that's still critical. You've got the advent now of technology in its various forms, and machine learning, the ability to get things done, which is great. The thing I really struggle with in the deal world is there's so many meetings that are held virtually, and people don't tend to go out and seem to visit factories anymore and do those type of things. And I struggle with that bit of it, because it's how can you get a good deal done and get that sense of behaviours and get that sense of culture when you're really doing it from an office or at home. I do struggle with that.
You've spoken about this, Jonathan, haven't you? About when you did deals originally, you'd have throw a late nighter, you'd shake hands, you might have a drink afterwards, in the days when you'd have a drink. And now so much of these deals are concluded over Zoom.
Yeah, I mean, the world's different now. Like I say, the point I was making, it's a bit of an anticlimax when a deal happens in the best of times after a load of work, but when it's just done on the phone and you just sign, you're not even sure you've signed it properly, and did your witness it, and it's just a different environment. But technology is making deals more efficient to run, and but it's still a really tough environment. The deal doing market is tough working in corporate finance.
Well, we've got a question about technology to come after the break, but I've just got one more question, John, before we go into the break. You've worked with multiple award-winning deal maker Jonathan Boyes for a number of years, and now you're working with another award-winning deal maker in Nicola Merritt, who you mentioned earlier, also a BusinessCloud Northern leader as well. What makes them exceptional in their field? Because you'll work with lots of advisors, but what makes them exceptional and above the others?
Well, both have got the highest degree of integrity. They're both a bit cheeky. Both a bit like to break the rules, which is good because they like to push the boundaries. Both of them look after their teams. The huge respect I've got for both Nikki and Jonathan in terms of looking after his people is absolutely second. And then I think for Jonathan, there's something I can remember from 20 or 30 years ago, which stood out to me with Jonathan, which was Jonathan would always give the right price, and even if he lost a mandate, which wasn't that often, and he would go in on what the value was, and his valuation might not be as high as the next person, the other advisor, but it was always his honesty that impressed me with him.
It's funny you mentioned Nicola Merritt there. I interviewed her on a round table as part of International Women's Day, and she was telling a story about how they'd offered a job to a partner, a female partner, and then she phoned up 2 weeks later and she said, "Look, Nicola, I'm going to have to withdraw." Well, she said, "Why is that then?" "Because I found out I'm pregnant and it's not fair on you." And she said, "Worst effect of, to hell it's not. You are. We wanted you before. We want you now more than ever. So, that's not an issue." And sometimes it needs female role models to actually say what's acceptable and what's not. And that's when you talk about integrity and looking after your staff. You've touched on it earlier as well, Jonathan, in terms of there aren't many female deal makers out there. And that's why somebody like Nicola and other people is so important.
No, I think Nicola's done a remarkable job at Cortus. She's done really well and full of admiration for what they're building.
Okay, just time for a quick break. When we come back, Jonathan and I will be discussing our interview with John and answering your listener questions. Welcome back to the second half of the Dealmaker Uncut podcast. We've just interviewed John Hughes, chairman of Cortus Advisory Group. What do you think, Jonathan?
Well, John's a very, very experienced chairman, non-exec. He's seen nearly as many deals as I have in his career. But then it's really interesting to hear how he's developed his non-executive roles and some of the things he thought about the various different experiences, the Modern Milkman, Cortus, and then going through the insolvency as well. So just really interesting to hear his perspective on lots of different businesses.
Yeah, and what I liked about John was the fact that he's worked in this industry for 40 plus years. He's definitely got a young mindset as well, and he's willing and desperate to learn new stuff as well. And sometimes you speak to people and they'll almost hark back to back when they were doing X, Y, and Z, the bores, and he's not that person as well. I mean, having an 8-year-old daughter certainly keeps him on his toes as well. It's just got another role with Sowena. I thought the stuff that he did and he spoke about with Yodel as well was really interesting. It's a name that a lot of people will be aware of as well. But not everything that he's been involved in has been a success, and that's true of life. Zedify, for example, went into administration as well. And I think he talks about the fact that when he goes through stuff like that, that sort of keeps him awake at night as well. So, yeah, really genuinely nice guy, John, and I think hopefully that came across in the interview. This next section is called Ask Jonathan, is when listeners can ask Jonathan any question they want. We did a special episode in November after Rachel Reeves' autumn budget, which ties into this question. Did Rachel Reeves' budget settle the nerves of the market? And moving on into 2026, which we are well into, has that continued?
Yeah, so we've seen obviously over the last few years how bad decision making by the Chancellor or by the government can affect the markets. Obviously, the Liz Truss's budget was a classic example. I think at the moment stock markets are riding pretty high in the UK and particularly in the US. So in terms of, it certainly didn't cause the level of disruption that it might have done. Did it actually settle down the market so that everything's now okay? I think the government's under the caution quite a few fronts, and some of the decisions made by the Labour government around national insurance and such like, some of the tax decisions they've made are still feeding through and not really helping. I think the market generally is okay. I think I've said before. I think that the M&A market is picking up slowly. I think there's lots of political shocks all over the place, but I think the UK is still got huge amounts of borrowing, and there's still a heavy amount of spending, particularly in the benefits sector. And so I think we've not heard the last of debates about the budget for when the next one comes along. But in the meantime, like I say, as it affects business and M&A, I think people are just getting on with it at the moment.
A very quick question from one of our regular listeners. Jonathan, can you explain the difference between buy side and sell side?
So all that really means is, when a corporate finance advisor, is selling a business. They're appointed by the shareholders of the business, sometimes the directors of the business, to run a sale process and sell the business, and that's sell side. Sometimes we're asked to advise a buyer of a business, so a private equity house or a corporate that is making an acquisition, and that's buy side. And on each side, there's an army of advisors on the buy side, and on the sell side, there's lawyers, due diligence providers, there's corporate finance advisors, and various other people get involved on both sides. So that's just what the jargon is, whether you're sell side or buy side.
Okay, final question. I work as a tech journalist as well. Lots of businesses are using technology to run their businesses. Are you?
Yeah, so we use some technology software called DealCloud as the primary way that we manage our business. DealCloud runs all the way through our business. It is a CRM system at one end of the spectrum, but it's also an execution platform. So all our origination activity we monitor on DealCloud, so we can see every meeting that people who go out to meet new potential clients. All the pitches are on DealCloud. All the jobs are executed, so the buyer's logs are executed on DealCloud. So I've got loads of information about our business. Whenever we approach, say, an investor or a private equity house, their account is automatically updated. So every PE house, I can immediately see what we've shown them and what whether they bid and what they bid. And so I get, as a leader of that business, I get so much information. I can see at a glance what our pipeline of work's like, how much we think our forward order book looks like. So it's just incredibly valuable as a piece of technology to help me drive the business.
Really interesting that. That's all for this episode of the Dealmaker Uncut podcast, powered by Alvarez Marsal. Massive thank you to Jonathan Boyers.
Thanks, Chris.
Thank you very much. And don't forget to subscribe to the podcast, tell your friends and family, and follow us on social media. Thanks very much.